So the first important notable thing for halflings is that they have cheap dig increases, and this is really, really fun to play with. So particularly their dig increases are 4 coins fewer than for most other factions. So they're saving 8 coins across 2 dig increases. So halflings will increase their digs basically every single game. You should never have a game that ends where you don't have your digs increased all the way. And part of it's really useful for building out, but also you're even scoring 6 points each time you do it. So it's like a no-brainer. You have to be increasing your digs at least at some point during the game. And going along with that, halflings get a point for every dig that they do. So, your dig increases are cheaper. You get 6 points for each of those dig increases, like every faction, but that's sort of a better return on the resources even because of the discount. And you're scoring for all those digs. So these are the diggers. They're the hardcore digging faction. The next thing to keep in mind is that they have 9 power and Bull 2 to start the game. They're one of the few factions with that, which means if they start on a power scroll, they have three power moves them to 12 power and Bull 2, which means they could first move double dig if they wanted to. So they're a faction that has pretty easy access to double dig if they want. And then the last thing here I want to point out is that you should pretty much ignore their stronghold. The new players kind of get enticed by this 3 spades here. The stronghold's actually really bad. Don't build it. You basically, most games it should go unbuilt. And if you're ever building it, it should be late in the game if it's big building scoring and you happen to be on the big building scroll, situations like that. But also you should be fine not building it, and you should never really open with it unless you're doing it for a laugh. Halflings usually like to start on E6, particularly if they think they can get a sanctuary town in the middle, like a 3-hex one, either that one or getting down to G2. They want at least one of their starting placements to be in the east, almost always. And F5 is kind of a default. It gives you access to digging G5 to get to H7. It also lets you get G4, and then with one ship, you can be getting to the south to maybe even do a 3rd town down there. And because you're using priest to increase digs, it's really nice to not have to increase your shipping too much. So it's pretty sweet then that all is connected one ship. Now the other, so that's probably your default. The other, I think, really strong one for halflings actually is to start double east. If you can start F5, F7, for example, and now you have the G5 dig to H7 and you have the E10 dig to D8. You're going to crank your worker production up that way. You can town pretty quickly on both sides of that. And that's just like really, you can even dwelling rush, right? And not temple round 1 doing that and into trading posts quickly. So that's a really sort of powerful start for halflings. The problem is, what do you do from there, right? It can be a bit hard to connect. So maybe you can increase your digs and dig D7 before someone can get there, and now you're at least connected this way. Or maybe it's dwarves and the G6 hex is gonna sit there, and dwarves will just tunnel to H8 and whatnot, and you can actually just make 2 towns and then dig G6 later. That's a possibility for halflings. And so there's the question of will you connect later, and can you get a 3rd town somehow? So as long as it fits playing the track, or you see ways to get a 3rd town somehow, or maybe you connect later, then double east could be nice. That's especially the case if this E6 hex isn't going to be able to be a sanctuary town. Maybe you try double east. Like if yellow's in the game, then double east is definitely an option. The other thing to consider if you want to start E6 and east is maybe actually think of yourself as a shipping faction. Can you get to 2 shipping really quickly? Can you beat other factions to B3 and be building on B2, A7, and all of a sudden connection to the to like F5 starts to look pretty flexible. You're going to have your digs increased. Maybe you get through here. Maybe you go via E8. Maybe you dig D6 and go to 3 ship later. You start to have a lot of options for connection. You're probably not increasing your digging as quickly because you had to put priests and coins towards shipping, but that can be a way to make halflings work as well. So halflings have a couple, like lots of nice options for openings because they have 1 dig for 2 hexes in the east. So almost always they want to be doing a temple and at least 2 new dwellings. So if you have dig scroll, or you can single dig in the east, or maybe or even if you don't have the 1 dig for 2 hexes in the east, you can double dig and get 2 new dwellings down that way. And so, temple, 2 new dwellings. And a lot of people like to go Earth 2 with them because if you think about it, later in the game, that worker is a dig and a point. So you're getting a dig and a point income plus a power every round. That sounds really good. They could go Earth 1, potentially, if you think you can get, right, if you're on dig scroll, you can go temple, 2 new dwellings, and take a coins power action. All of a sudden, it's like, all right, maybe I can get away with making that favor be Earth 1 because I'm not really suffering for workers and coins. So you could consider that. I personally think Fire 1 is a little underrated for halflings because they can crank up their worker production so easily that actually the coins are often quite helpful. So I think people don't take Fire 1 enough, but I would say definitely the most common are Earth 1, Earth 2. So they can sometimes, so the other important opening I want to emphasize here is starting on worker power opens the possibility of opening temple 3 new dwellings because that worker now, and the fact that you have 1 dig for 2 hexes. So if you start on that, now you have 12 power in bowl 2, you can double dig and put down 3 new dwellings because you have the dwelling from the scroll. You have 1 dig for 2 hexes in the east, 1 more dig somewhere, anywhere, middle or east. And now you're opening temple. 3 new dwellings is just really, really sweet. So definitely look for opportunities to do that. Double temple with halflings or opening sanctuary as halflings. Like you'd only want to do the sanctuary one if it's big building scroll and big building round. Double temple as halflings is interesting if you want to do that sort of shipping route where you try to get to the north pretty quickly. It can work because they're also happy to use priests towards dig increases later. The thing is that worker production is so good for them that it's a little scary because of the digging being so good for them. It's a little not ideal to be sluggish in your worker production. So I think that's really the downside of going going temple, to temple or sanctuary. But if you're going to go to temple or sanctuary, Earth 2 has to be one of your favors that you're taking. I mentioned if you start double east, you can do cool dwelling rushes with halflings where you do 1 dig for 2 hexes in 2 spots. That can be a really fun thing to experiment with. Less so for beginners. I think it's a little tricky, but that might be something that you can try at least. So a lot of times for halflings, a question in your development, so you're trying to get your worker production up as fast as possible. Like let's say you're in the east and you're getting your dwellings down. So trying to figure out, can I get a sanctuary town in the middle? So can I find 3 hexes in this area to get a sanctuary town? And then the questions to ask yourself are, can I do a 3rd town? And can I connect? Okay, so the easiest way to 3rd town is to do it in the south. Ideally those 4 hexes, but even if you lose H4, G3, E9, I9 might sit there, and because you're halflings and you dig so readily and easily, you could even town using that hex. And that has a nice feature of connecting on 1 ship then. So that could be a 3rd town, or maybe on 2 ship, you will loop around and dig D7, and then you can do a 3rd town here, or you could dig D6 and then D7 to get over there. Other possibilities would be getting to the north pretty quickly. So if you get E5 and then get to 2 ship, you could be building B2 and be doing a town in one of these combinations, for example, or with A7. So you have the possibility of a north down potentially. And then the other question is, can I connect, right? Is there some way for me to connect? And ideally, you'd find a way to sort of dig yourself to connection. But so you can connect pretty efficiently if you go to 3 ship, right? And you're like getting A7 and then like E8. Now you've really efficiently connected. It's a little bit hard to increase your shipping and digs, but if you prioritize the shipping increase, that definitely becomes pretty feasible. The other possibility is, can you find a way to sort of cheaply connect later in the game? Let me give you an example. Imagine like red is in and they're going to dig this gray, but yellow's in the game and they dig this red. So red has no incentive to tackle this F4 hex. This is the hex that I want to talk about, which is, if no one really wants it, it might sit there all the way till round 5 or 6. And if you notice, your E6, yes, it's a triple dig, but if you can get that hex, now on 3 ship, you're connected right through here. So you want to kind of be open-minded as halflings for connection paths. There might be sort of high dig, because by the end of the game, you probably have extra workers to dig with. The other thing is, in your development is, again, make sure you're keeping your worker production high. And if it happens to be a game with round 3 or 4 where you get points for digging, that's definitely a situation where you want to make sure you're getting your worker production up quickly and then be ready to hit that round pretty hard. Halflings are medium strength. Somewhat flexible and medium strength, I would say. The big things to look out for halflings. So one is there dig scoring in round 3 or 4, especially round 4. If there's dig scoring in round 4, halflings can rack up the points in that. So that's a huge plus for them. On the downside is, am I going to get 1 dig for 2 hexes in the east? And sometimes the answer is no, right? So if you're on F5 and Darklings are in, Darklings in particular like to start on G5 then and just play in a way where they don't even bother trying to connect. They're just going to do that. And that blocks your 1 dig for 2 hexes. You can survive. It just really takes the wind out of your sails a bit because you lose that 1 dig for 2 hexes. So I think Darklings in particular, you don't want to see. And then I'd say also nomads are a faction that can be a bit unpleasant. So if you're on E6 and nomads are on F3, now that can make it hard to sanctuary town in the middle. They also might be on B4. They place 3 places, and so that can threaten, for example, A7 and your north connection. They also could be on E8. So they're on D3 usually and F3. If they're on E8, it can make it hard to connect and they might get to B4 before you. They also might start on G4, which is just kind of annoying. They're trying to get your power and make it a little harder for you to get to the south. Now you need 2 ship to get to the south instead of 1 ship. And because you like to increase digs, it's a little hard for you to get to 2 ship and erase them to E8. So nomads can be annoying. It depends a little bit on where they're going to place, but it can definitely shape the game in a way that could be unpleasant for you. The other really big thing to look out for is you really want to be playing in the east, placing at least one of your structures in the east every single game. Almost every single game you want at least one of your structures in the east. And if you don't have green or gray, that can be really difficult because you might be sitting in the east by yourself waiting for someone to come to give you neighbor. So if green or gray aren't in the game, you might want to think twice about how good halflings are in that situation. When you're ready to start experimenting a little bit with halflings, you can try doing a dwelling rush with them. For example, out of Double East, get 4 new dwellings down and go from there. That's really fun. You have all those workers to work with. And then another idea that I really have done with some success on multiple occasions is playing tall halflings. So you do 10 or fewer structures, and you just try to do 2 towns, be a little bit culty, and then score with digging and favors and things like that, ship increase, hitting the pass scrolls. So tall halflings is also one that can be fun.